The smell hit David Reese before anything else. Blood had a universal quality across species, metallic and sharp, cutting through the recycled air of the cargo bay. He stopped mid-step, his inspection tablet nearly slipping from his hands. The mining station's lower decks were supposed to be empty during third shift. Nobody came down here except maintenance workers like him, checking seals and looking for microfractures in the hull. "Hello," his voice echoed off metal walls. "Station security, identify yourself." A wet cough answered him. David moved toward the sound, his boots quiet on the grated floor. Behind a stack of storage containers, he found her. The alien woman was massive, nearly 7 feet tall, with deep blue scales covering her body. 4 arms pressed against her torso where dark blood leaked between her fingers. 2 small figures huddled behind her, their eyes wide with terror. "Human," the word came out garbled, her mouth not built for English sounds. "Please, my children." David dropped to his knees beside her, his hands hovering uselessly. He had basic first aid training, but this was beyond anything he knew. The wounds looked like blast burns, the kind made by energy weapons. Her breathing came in short gasps. "I'll call medical, just hold on." He reached for his comm device. One of her hands shot out and grabbed his wrist with surprising strength. "No time, listen." She coughed again and more blood appeared. "I am Silith, Virin species. These are Nira and Kess, my daughters." The 2 children pressed closer to their mother. They looked like smaller versions of her, with the same blue scales and 4 arms, but their faces still held the softness of youth. One of them made a keening sound that needed no translation. "Pirates destroyed my ship. I made it here, but—" Silith's grip weakened. "Virin law says orphans go to military schools. They take children and make them into weapons. No love, no softness, just duty and fighting." David felt his chest tighten. He knew about losing people. His wife had died 3 years ago in a transport accident. The pain still lived in him like a second heartbeat. "I watched you," Silith continued, her voice fatting. 6 months I traded here. Saw you help a Centauran child find his parents. Saw you share your food with poor workers. Humans are different. You care for young ones, even those not your own. This is known across the galaxy. I can't just take your children. There are procedures, laws." But even as he said it, David looked at the 2 small faces staring at him. They understood their mother was dying. Children always understood that, no matter what species. "Please," Silith pulled him closer. "Better a kind human than a cold creche. I choose you. I give permission. My daughters deserve to know gentleness. They deserve to be children." Her breathing rattled. "Promise me." David thought about his empty quarters, about the silence that filled his days, about the hole his wife had left when she died. He thought about turning these children over to authorities who would ship them off to become soldiers before they even understood who they were. "I promise," he said. Silith's body relaxed. She spoke in her own language to her daughters, words that sounded like rocks tumbling in a river. Both children began to cry, a high-pitched sound that made David's heart ache. Their mother touched each of their faces with her multiple hands, then looked back at David. "Thank you, human, you give me peace." Her eyes closed and her breathing stopped. The 2 girls sobbed louder. David sat frozen for a moment, wondering what he had just done. Then instinct took over, the same instinct that made humans reach out to crying children everywhere. He opened his arms. The girls stared at him. They had 4 arms each, scales instead of skin, and eyes that reflected light like mirrors. They were completely alien, but they were also children who had just lost their mother. Slowly, the smaller one moved forward. She pressed against David's chest, her body shaking with sobs. Her sister followed, and suddenly David had his arms full of grieving alien children who smelled like rain on hot stone and felt too warm against his skin. "It's okay," he whispered, knowing they probably didn't understand. "I've got you, you're safe now." He held them while they cried, there on the floor of a cargo bay next to their mother's body. He had no idea how to feed them, where they would sleep, or what they needed to survive. He didn't know their language or their customs. He was just a mining engineer who worked too many hours and ate frozen meals alone in his quarters. But he had made a promise to a dying mother, and David Reese kept his promises. Footsteps echoed through the bay. Security had finally noticed his location beacon staying in one place too long. David looked down at the two children clinging to him and made his decision. Whatever came next, whatever laws or regulations or cultural barriers stood in his way, these two were under his protection now. "My name is David," he said softly to them. "I'm going to take care of you." The smaller girl looked up at him with wet eyes and said something in VRin that he didn't understand. But her hand gripped his shirt tighter, and that he understood perfectly. The security team rounded the corner, their expressions shifting from alert to shocked as they took in the scene. David stood up carefully, keeping the children close. "Get Commander Wade," he said, "and someone from Xenobiology. These two are with me now." His new life had just begun, and he had no idea if he was ready for it. 3 days had passed since Silith died in the cargo bay, and David had learned that good intentions meant nothing when you didn't know what temperature alien children needed to sleep. Nira and Kes huddled together in the corner of his quarters, shivering despite the blankets he had piled on them. Their scales had turned a duller shade of blue, and they barely ate the food he offered. Dr. Patel arrived with a medical scanner and a sympathetic expression. The station's xenobiologist was a small woman with gray streaks in her black hair and the patient manner of someone used to explaining complex things. "Your environmental controls are set for human comfort," she said, adjusting his wall panel. "VRin come from a much hotter world. They need at least 35 degrees Celsius and higher humidity." The temperature climbed, and within minutes, David was sweating through his shirt. But Nira and Kes lifted their heads, their scales brightening slightly. They looked at Dr. Patel with cautious interest. "That's better," David said, wiping his forehead. "What about food? They won't touch anything I give them." Dr. Patel crouched near the girls, speaking slowly. "VRin are obligate carnivores. They need meat, preferably raw or barely cooked. Their digestive systems can't process most plant matter." She pulled out a container from her bag. "I brought some protein paste. It's not ideal, but it will keep them healthy until you can arrange proper supplies." Kes, the smaller twin, reached out with one of her 4 hands. She sniffed the paste and made a clicking sound. Then she grabbed the container and began eating, her sister quickly joining her. They ate like they were starving, which they probably were. "Thank you," David said. "I had no idea." "Most humans wouldn't." Dr. Patel stood, dusting off her knees. "You took on something difficult, David. Raising alien children isn't like raising human ones. Different biology, different psychology, different cultural needs." "I made a promise." "I know, that's why I'm helping." She handed him a data pad. "This has basic VRin care information. Temperature ranges, diet requirements, sleep patterns. They'll need about 16 hours of rest per day at their age. And David, they're traumatized. Losing a parent is hard for any child, but VRin form extremely strong family bonds. They may not trust you for a long time." As if to prove her point, both girls finished eating and immediately retreated to their corner, watching David with unreadable expressions. They spoke to each other in their clicking, rumbling language, and he felt completely shut out. Commander Wade visited that afternoon, his uniform crisp and his expression neutral. The station's administrator was a practical man who followed regulations but wasn't without compassion. "The VRin community is filing complaints," he said, standing in David's doorway because the heat made him uncomfortable. "They say you have no right to keep VRin children, that you'll corrupt them with human ways. Their mother gave them to me. I believe you, but there's no record of that transaction, no legal documentation. In the eyes of Viren law, you're just a human who took possession of orphans. Wade's expression softened. I'm not saying they're right. I'm saying you need to be prepared for a fight. The Viren take their cultural traditions seriously. So do I take my promises seriously? Wade nodded. Fair enough. I'm approving your temporary guardianship through station authority, but if the Viren government gets involved, my hands might be tied. He looked past David at the two girls. They're citizens of their own species first, station residents second. Keep that in mind. After Wade left, David sat on his bed and watched Nira and Kes whisper to each other. They were so small, so clearly frightened. He wanted to comfort them, but every time he moved closer, they pressed tighter together. That evening, he tried something different. He pulled up videos on his tablet, simple cartoons that required no language. The girls watched from their corner, their mirror-like eyes reflecting the screen's glow. After an hour, Kes moved closer, just a few inches. Then Nira followed, maintaining her protective position. By the time the third cartoon ended, both girls sat near enough that David could have touched them. He didn't. He just let them exist in the same space, sharing something simple and unthreatening. The next morning, a Viren merchant named Grull appeared at David's door. He was huge, even for his species, with dark green scales and elaborate markings that suggested high status. His four arms crossed in a gesture David's data pad said indicated displeasure. "You are the human keeping our children," Grull said in perfect English. "I'm the human their mother entrusted them to," David corrected. Grull's eyes narrowed. Silith was a traitor who fled her duties. Her children carry that shame, but they are still Viren and they belong with their own kind. You cannot understand what they need. You cannot teach them our ways. You are making them weak. David felt anger rise in his chest. Their mother didn't think strength meant being raised without love. Love is a human weakness. Viren children need discipline, structure, purpose. They need to learn honor in combat. What will you teach them? How to be soft? How to cry? Grull leaned forward. I am petitioning to have them removed from your care. Many agree with me. You have 1 month before the formal hearing. Enjoy your time with them, human. It will not last. He left before David could respond. The threat hung in the air like smoke. That night, David couldn't sleep. He lay in his bed, listening to the quiet breathing of 2 alien children who depended on him. The heat made his quarters feel like an oven, and his clothes stuck to his skin. He had 1 month to prove he could raise children from a species he barely understood. In the darkness, he heard movement. Kes appeared beside his bed, her small face barely visible. She held out one of her 4 hands. David took it carefully, feeling the warmth of her scales. She said something in Viren, soft and hesitant. He had no idea what it meant, but her hand squeezed his gently before she returned to her sister. It wasn't much, but it was a start. The school building occupied the station's northern ring, where artificial gravity felt almost normal and windows showed the endless black of space beyond. David held both girls' hands, his palms sweating from nervousness rather than heat. He had argued with himself for days about this decision. Maybe it was too soon. Maybe they needed more time to adjust. But Dr. Patel had been clear that Viren children were social creatures who suffered without peer interaction. Annie Foster met them at the entrance. She was young for a teacher, barely 30, with red hair tied back and the kind of smile that put people at ease. She knelt to the girls' level without hesitation. "Hello, Nira. Hello, Kes. I'm Annie. Welcome to our school." Both girls pressed against David's legs. They had started wearing simple clothes he had ordered, bright colors that Viren traditionally avoided, but that seemed to make them happy. Kes had chosen yellow. Nira preferred green. Small victories in a month of difficult adjustments. "They don't speak much English yet," David said, "and they're still getting used to being around others." "That's perfectly fine. We have translation software and plenty of patience." Annie stood and gestured inside. We have 6 other Virin children in their age group, plus humans, 2 Centaurans, and a Belton child. Everyone learns together here. The classroom reminded David of pictures from Earth schools, with small desks arranged in clusters and educational posters on the walls. But the desks accommodated different body types, and the posters showed multiple species and their home worlds. The other children looked up when they entered, their reactions ranging from curiosity to suspicion. 2 Virin children, a boy and a girl, immediately stood up and moved away from the empty desks near them. The boy spoke in rapid Virin, his tone sharp. Nira responded, her voice defensive, and suddenly both girls were shouting at the other Virin children. Annie clapped her hands twice. English or translation mode, please. Everyone needs to understand. The Virin boy switched languages, his accent thick but understandable. They should not be here. They live with a human. They are contaminated. That's enough, Locks. Annie's voice stayed calm but firm. In this classroom, we treat everyone with respect. Nira and Kes are students just like you. Locke sat down, but his expression remained hostile. His sister, Mara, looked torn between agreement and doubt. The human children watched with wide eyes, while the other alien students seemed confused by the tension. David wanted to stay, to protect the girls from this rejection, but Annie had explained that parents couldn't remain in class. He squeezed both their hands and knelt down. "I'll be right outside if you need me," he whispered. "You're brave, you're strong, you can do this." Nira looked at him with those mirror-like eyes, then nodded once. Kes clung a moment longer before letting go. David left the room feeling like he was abandoning them, even though he knew this was necessary. He waited in the corridor, pretending to work on his tablet while actually listening through the thin walls. He heard Annie beginning a lesson about magnetic fields, demonstrating with small metal objects and different types of magnets. The children participated in various languages, the translation software creating an odd echo effect. Then he heard Annie say something that made him lean closer. "This is a complex problem. Can anyone figure out how to arrange these magnets so they form a stable ring?" Silence, then a small voice speaking hesitant English. "If you put same poles facing, they push, different poles pull, so you need pattern, north, south, all around." "That's exactly right, Kes. Can you show us?" David smiled despite his worry. Kes had always been the clever one, quick to learn and observe. Nira was the protector, the fierce one who put herself between her sister and any perceived threat. Together, they balanced each other. The next hours crawled past. When Annie finally opened the door, she motioned him inside. The classroom had emptied except for his 2 girls, who sat at a desk drawing with digital styluses. "They did well," Annie said quietly. Kes impressed everyone with her problem-solving. Nira didn't speak much, but she was attentive and participated when called on. The other Virin children kept their distance, but some of the human kids tried to include them during free time. "That's something," David said, relief washing through him. "It's more than something, it's a start." Annie glanced at the girls. "They're resilient, David, traumatized, yes, but not broken. Give them time." Over the following weeks, a routine developed. David would walk the girls to school each morning, their small hands in his. He learned to braid the small crest of flexible spines that ran down their backs, a grooming behavior Dr. Patel said was important for Virin bonding. He cooked them meals of real meat, learning which cuts they preferred and how they liked it prepared. He read to them from books translated into Virin, his pronunciation terrible but his effort appreciated. Kes began sleeping in the nest he had built near his bed instead of in the corner. She would wake him sometimes, speaking Virin words he still didn't understand, and he would hold her until she fell back asleep. Nira remained more distant, but she had started correcting his Virin pronunciation with patient repetition, teaching him like a slow student. At school, human children named Tyler and Rachel befriended them, unbothered by the language barrier or different appearance. They played simple games during breaks, shared snacks, and drew pictures together. The Centauran girl, Dira, joined them occasionally, her tentacle-like appendages moving in patterns that expressed friendliness. But Lox and Mara and the other Viren children still avoided them. Worse, their parents had joined Grull's petition. The hearing was scheduled for 2 weeks away, and David knew his success with the girls wouldn't matter if Viren law didn't recognize his right to raise them. One evening, while David prepared their dinner, Kess appeared at his side. She watched him cut the meat with all 4 of her hands clasped together. "David, father," she said carefully in English. He nearly dropped the knife. It was the first time either girl had called him that. He looked down at her small face, seeing hope and fear mixed in her expression. "Yes, Kess. We stay, forever stay." He knelt and pulled her into a hug, feeling her warmth and the rapid beating of her heart. "I'm going to do everything I can to make that happen, I promise you." She hugged him back with all 4 arms, and for a moment, David believed they might actually win this fight. Ambassador Krall arrived on a Viren diplomatic vessel that dwarfed most ships docked at the station. News of his arrival spread quickly through the corridors, and by the time David finished his shift, everyone seemed to know why the ambassador had come. The hearing would take place in 3 days, and suddenly those 3 days felt like 3 hours. David stood in Commander Wade's office, his hands clenched at his sides. The ambassador sat across from Wade's desk, his 4 arms arranged in a formal position that David's translation pad said indicated official business. Krall was older than most Viren David had seen, his scales marked with elaborate patterns that spoke of high rank and military honors. "The children are Viren citizens," Krall said, his English perfect and cold. "Their mother, Silith, was wanted for desertion and theft of military property. Her flight from justice does not grant custody rights to a random human who happened upon her death." "She chose me," David said. "She asked me to protect them. That has to count for something." "It counts for nothing under Viren law. Children belong to the state when parents prove unworthy. Silith proved her unworthiness through criminal action. These girls will be returned to Viren space and enrolled in proper educational facilities where they will learn honor and duty." Commander Wade leaned forward. "This station operates under Federation law, not Viren law exclusively. If David can prove he provides adequate care, and if the children show no signs of harm, then his guardianship claim has merit." "Adequate care," Krall's scales rippled with something that might have been contempt. "He is not Viren. He cannot teach them combat, cannot instruct them in proper behavior, cannot prepare them for their role in society. He feeds them and keeps them warm. This is not adequate. This is imprisonment in comfort." David felt his anger rising but forced his voice to stay level. "They're children, not soldiers. They deserve a childhood, not training for war." "You prove my point, human. You do not understand our culture. Viren children are raised with purpose from birth. Discipline, structure, martial training, these are not cruelties. These are necessities. Your softness will make them weak, unsuited for life among their own kind." "Their own kind rejected them," David shot back. "Your merchants and families here won't even let them play with other Viren children. You talk about honor, but where's the honor in abandoning orphans?" Krall stood, his full height making David step back instinctively. "I have documentation proving Silith's criminal status. I have testimony from the Viren community here describing your inadequate care. I have evaluations from Viren educators showing the girls lack basic cultural knowledge expected of their age. The Arbiter will rule in my favor because the law supports my position, not your emotional appeals." He left the office, his heavy footsteps echoing down the corridor. Wade sighed and rubbed his temples. "He's not wrong about the law," Wade admitted. "The Federation recognizes species sovereignty in matters of child custody. unless you can prove the children are in danger under VRIN care, or show that keeping them benefits them significantly more than traditional placement, you're fighting an uphill battle. David returned to his quarters feeling defeated. Neera and Kes sat together doing homework, their tablets displaying mathematical problems in both English and VRIN. They looked up when he entered, and Kes immediately came over. "David, father is sad," she said, her English improving daily. "I'm fine, little one," he managed to smile, "just a long day." But Neera approached too, her expression serious. She was the observant one, always watching and analyzing. She spoke in VRIN and Kes translated. "Neera says bad people want to take us. She hears things at school. Other VRIN talk when they think we don't listen." David knelt so he was at their eye level. "There's going to be a hearing. Some people think you should live with other VRIN, learn VRIN ways. An important person will decide." "We don't want to go," Kes said, her voice small. "Please, David, father. I'm going to fight for you, I promise, but I need your help." He took both their hands. "Tomorrow there will be a meeting. They're going to ask you questions. You need to be honest and brave. Can you do that?" Both girls nodded, but he saw fear in their eyes. That night, neither of them slept well. David heard them whispering in the darkness, their voices worried and young. The preliminary hearing took place in the station's legal office, a neutral room with plain walls and uncomfortable chairs. A Centauran arbiter named Sorrel presided, her tentacles moving in patterns that indicated impartial judgment. Kral sat on one side with Grull and two other VRIN witnesses. David sat on the other with a lawyer Wade had recommended, a practical woman named Roberts who specialized in interspecies cases. Kral presented his documentation with cold efficiency. Records of Silith's desertion, evidence of stolen supplies, testimony from VRIN merchants describing how the girls lived in excessive heat, ate improperly prepared food, and showed no knowledge of proper VRIN behavior. He painted David as a well-meaning but incompetent guardian who would ruin the children through ignorance. Then Kral requested the girls be brought in for evaluation. David's stomach dropped as Neera and Kes entered, looking tiny and frightened in the formal setting. The arbiter asked them to sit. Kral spoke to them in VRIN, rapid questions that David couldn't follow. The girls answered hesitantly, their voices getting smaller with each question. Then Kral switched to a physical demonstration. "Show me the 3 basic combat stances for your age group," he commanded in English. The girls looked at each other, confused. They didn't know. Of course they didn't know. They were 6 years old and had been learning math and art and how to make friends, not how to fight. "Recite the Code of Honor, 1st through 5th verses." More confusion, more silence. Kral turned to the arbiter. "As you can see, these children have been allowed to forget their heritage. They cannot perform basic tasks any VRIN child should know. This human has failed in his duty to preserve their cultural identity. They are VRIN in body only. In mind and spirit, he has made them into something else." David started to stand to object, but Roberts put a hand on his arm. The arbiter raised a tentacle for silence. "The evaluation continues tomorrow. The children may return to current placement pending final decision." Sorrel's translator device made her voice sound mechanical. "This hearing is adjourned." David took the girls' hands and led them out, feeling like he had already lost. David woke to alarms blaring through the station's speakers. Emergency protocols meant debris collision or hull breach, and maintenance workers like him were required to respond immediately. He scrambled out of bed, already reaching for his emergency gear. "David, father," Kes appeared in the doorway, Neera right behind her. Both girls looked frightened. "Stay here, lock the door, I'll be back soon." He pulled on his suit and grabbed his toolkit. "You know what to do if there's decompression, right?" They nodded. He had drilled them on emergency procedures, just like every responsible parent on a space station did. He kissed their foreheads and ran. The emergency turned out to be a cargo hauler that had lost navigation and clipped the station's docking arm. Not catastrophic, but serious enough that they needed every available hand to seal compartments and prevent atmosphere loss. David worked alongside a mixed crew of humans and aliens, welding patches and checking seals. It took 6 hours to stabilize everything. By the time he finished, exhausted and covered in metal dust, he realized his comm device had been receiving messages, missed calls from station security, texts from Dr. Patel. His stomach dropped as he read the latest message. The girls aren't in your quarters, checking school and common areas. He ran faster than he had ever run before, his heart pounding so hard it hurt. Not again. He couldn't lose more people he cared about. His mind filled with terrible possibilities. Decompression, accident, kidnapping. He burst into the security office, wild-eyed and desperate. "Where are they?" Captain Hayes, head of station security, looked relieved to see him. "Calm down, they're safe. They're at the damaged docking section." Why?" "Come see for yourself." David followed Hayes through corridors still showing damage from the collision. They reached the affected area where emergency crews were finishing cleanup. And there, sitting on cargo containers with emergency blankets wrapped around them, were Neera and Kes. Dr. Patel sat with them, looking tired but impressed. Several crew members stood nearby, including 2 injured workers receiving medical attention. When the girls saw David, they jumped down and ran to him, all 4 arms each wrapping around him. "What happened?" David asked, holding them tight. "Why did you leave the quarters?" Hayes stepped forward. "Your girls saved 2 lives today, maybe more." "What?" One of the injured workers, a human woman named Peters, spoke up from where a medic was treating her arm. "The collision shifted cargo in hold 7. Containers started falling. We were trapped under debris and the automated systems couldn't detect us because of interference. These 2 found us." Dr. Patel stood and brushed off her clothes. "When you didn't return after a few hours, they got worried. They left your quarters despite your instructions because they wanted to make sure you were safe. They started searching the damaged areas. 4 arms and small size meant they could crawl through spaces we couldn't reach," Hayes added. "They heard Peters and Chang calling for help and squeezed through collapsed scaffolding to get to them. Then they ran for help." David looked down at the girls. Kes was crying, pressing her face against his chest. Neera looked defiant and proud at the same time. "You could have been hurt," David said. "You should have stayed safe." "You teach us to help people," Neera said in careful English. "You say humans help, we help too." The worker called Chang laughed despite his injuries. "Kids got 4 arms and used every single one of them to clear debris off my legs. Tell you what, I don't care what species someone is. Those 2 are heroes in my book." By evening, the story had spread throughout the station. The local news service ran a piece showing security footage of Neera and Kes crawling through dangerous spaces to reach the trapped workers. Other species came forward with their own stories. A Belton family talked about how David had helped them when they first arrived at the station. A Centauran merchant recalled seeing him share his emergency rations with hungry dock workers. Annie Foster arrived at David's quarters with a data pad full of testimonies. "My students wanted to help, parents too, even some of the Viren families." She showed him videos of human children talking about how Neera and Kes were their friends, how they helped with homework and played fairly and never excluded anyone. Deera, the Centauran girl, described in her musical language how the sisters had defended her from bullies. Tyler and Rachel had drawn pictures of the 4 of them together. Then Annie played a video that made David's throat tight. Lox and Mara, the young Viren siblings who had rejected the girls at first, sat in front of the camera looking uncomfortable. "We were wrong," Lox said slowly. "Neera and Kes are brave. They saved humans even though humans are not Viren. That is honorable. Our parents say we should tell the truth at the hearing. We will say they are good. They are Virin and human both. The final hearing took place the next day. The same neutral room, but this time it was packed. Workers from the rescue, teachers and students from the school, Dr. Patel with detailed reports on the girls' health and development, even some Virin community members who had changed their minds. Roberts, David's lawyer, presented their case methodically. The girls were thriving academically, socially, and physically under David's care. They had friends across multiple species. They had acted with courage and selflessness, traits any culture should value. Ambassador Krall tried to dismiss it. Emotional appeals do not change law. These children still lack proper Virin cultural education. Then Annie stood up. With respect, Ambassador, I've taught many species over my career. Education isn't just about cultural facts. It's about developing good people who contribute to society. Nira and Kes are developing into exactly that. They're learning Virin language and history through our curriculum. They maintain Virin dietary and environmental needs, but they're also learning cooperation, problem-solving, and empathy. Aren't those universal values? Grull, who had been one of David's harshest critics, stood next. The merchant looked uncomfortable but determined. I have watched this human with our children. He respects our ways while giving them softness we sometimes forget children need. My son and daughter now see honor in kindness, not just strength. Perhaps there is more than one way to raise a Virin child. The arbiter's tentacles moved in contemplation. I will announce my decision tomorrow. Until then, current arrangements remain in place. That night, David held both girls close, uncertain of what morning would bring but grateful for every moment he had with them. The hearing room felt different today. Sunlight from the station's simulated day cycle streamed through the windows, and the space seemed less hostile, more hopeful. David sat with Nira and Kes on either side of him, their small hands gripping his. Across the room, Ambassador Krall maintained his formal posture, but something in his bearing suggested he knew the wind had shifted. Arbiter Sorrel arranged her documents with careful tentacle movements. The Centaur's translator device hummed to life, and the room fell silent. This case has required extensive consideration, Sorrel began. We must balance cultural sovereignty with child welfare, tradition with adaptation, and law with compassion. I have reviewed all testimony, examined precedents, and consulted with Federation legal experts. David felt Kes squeeze his hand tighter. Nira sat very still, barely breathing. Ambassador Krall argues that Virin law requires these children be raised in traditional facilities. This argument has legal merit. Virin are a sovereign species with established customs regarding orphan children. However, Federation law also recognizes that the mother's dying wishes carry legal weight when clearly expressed and witnessed. Krall's scales rippled with displeasure. More significantly, Sorrel continued, Federation law prioritizes child welfare above cultural tradition when the two conflict. The evidence presented shows that Nira and Kes are thriving under David Reese's care. They are healthy, educated, socially integrated, and demonstrably happy. They maintain connection to Virin culture through language study, dietary needs, and environmental accommodations. They also benefit from exposure to multiple cultures, developing skills that traditional Virin education might not provide. The arbiter's tentacles moved in a pattern David's pad translated as thoughtful judgment. The rescue operation 3 days ago reveals character. These children, raised for mere months by a human guardian, demonstrated courage, quick thinking, and selfless concern for others. They did not hesitate to help beings of another species. This suggests that David Reese is successfully instilling positive values that transcend any single culture. Ambassador Krall stood. Arbiter, with respect, you are setting dangerous precedent. If we allow humans to raise Virin children simply because they provide adequate physical care, we undermine our entire cultural structure. These children will never be proper V-Rin. They will be something else, something neither human nor truly our species. Perhaps, Sorrel said calmly, they will be something better, a bridge between species, a demonstration that family transcends biology. She paused, and David felt time stretch impossibly long. I rule in favor of David Reese retaining full legal guardianship of Nira and Kess. The mother's consent is recognized as valid under Federation law. The children's welfare is demonstrably protected. This ruling supersedes V-Rin's sovereign claims in this specific case, due to the extraordinary circumstances and clear evidence of successful alternative care. The room erupted. David heard cheering from the gallery where Annie and Dr. Patel and others sat. He heard angry hissing from some V-Rin observers, but mostly he felt two small bodies crash into him as Nira and Kess threw all 8 of their arms around him, crying and laughing at the same time. "We stay," Kess sobbed into his chest. "Forever stay." "Forever," David promised, his own eyes wet. Ambassador Krall approached as the crowd began to disperse. His expression was unreadable, but he inclined his head slightly toward David. "You have won this battle, human. I hope you understand the responsibility you carry. These children are V-Rin, regardless of who raises them. They will face challenges among their own kind. They will never quite fit into our society." "Then maybe," David said quietly, "your society needs to change, or make room for different kinds of V-Rin." Krall studied him for a long moment, then did something unexpected. He reached out with one hand and placed it briefly on Kess's head, a gesture David's pad indicated was a traditional V-Rin blessing. "Perhaps you are right," the ambassador said. "Time will tell." He left without another word. Grull appeared next, looking less hostile than before. "My children ask if yours can come to dinner next week. My wife makes traditional V-Rin roasted meat. We would be honored if you joined us." "We'd like that," David said, surprised and touched. Over the following weeks, life found a new rhythm. David officially adopted both girls under station law, and the paperwork was filed with Federation records. Commander waded through a small celebration in the station's main hall, and children from the school made decorations in multiple languages welcoming Nira and Kess as permanent residents. The girls continued school, their English improving daily while David worked on learning V-Rin with their patient teaching. They made more friends, including finally connecting with other young V-Rin who were curious about their unusual family. Lox and Mara became regular visitors, and David often found 4 children in his quarters instead of 2, all of them laughing and playing games that required no single species rules. Annie reported that both girls excelled in different areas. Kess showed remarkable aptitude for mathematics and engineering. Nira developed a talent for art and storytelling. They were becoming their own people, shaped by both their V-Rin heritage and their human upbringing. Dr. Patel continued to visit regularly, tracking their development for a research paper about cross-species family structures. "You're making history," she told David one evening while the girls showed her their latest school projects. "There are other cases of humans raising alien children, but none this successful or well-documented." "I'm just keeping a promise," David said. "You're doing more than that. You're proving that family is a choice, not just biology, that love and commitment matter more than matching DNA." 6 months after the hearing, David walked his daughters to school like every other morning. Kess held his left hand, chattering about a science experiment she wanted to try. Nira held his right, quieter but content, occasionally adding comments in the comfortable way of children who feel secure. They passed other families, humans and aliens and mixed groups. Some nodded in greeting, others smiled. A few still looked skeptical, but even those had stopped openly objecting. The station had changed, slowly accepting that families came in many forms. At the school entrance, both girls hugged him with all their arms. no longer shy about showing affection in public. They ran inside to join their friends, their laughter mixing with dozens of other children's voices. David watched them go, thinking about Silith and her desperate choice in that cargo bay. She had trusted him with her most precious treasures, believing that humans could see past scales and extra arms to the children underneath. He had proven her right, but she had also proven something about him, that he could love again after loss. That family wasn't about who you were born to, but who chose you and who you chose in return. His comm device buzzed with a work assignment, and David turned to head to the docks. As he walked through the corridor, he passed a poster the children had made. It showed stick figures of every species on the station holding hands in a circle, with words written in multiple languages. Family is everyone who loves you. Simple truth, written by children who understood it better than most adults. David smiled and went to work, knowing his daughters would be waiting for him when his shift ended, ready to tell him about their day, and ask him to help with homework and share dinner in quarters kept too hot for comfort but perfect for the family he had built from tragedy and choice.